The sun hung low over Emporium, Texas, painting the dusty streets gold as Luke Carter guided his horse toward town. His shirt clung to his back after a long day of ranch work, but he didn't mind the ache in his shoulders. Luke wasn't the kind of man who complained. He liked quiet days, steady hands, and work that kept his mind calm. He didn't expect much from people anymore, until that evening when he stopped by the small diner near the railway track. The bell above the diner door jingled softly as Luke stepped inside. The smell of coffee and warm pie filled the air. Behind the counter stood a young woman with nervous hands and big, hopeful eyes. Her name tag said Emily. She smiled shyly when she saw him, though her voice trembled when she asked for his order. She was new. Luke could tell by the way she kept checking the menu board as if afraid to make a mistake. Coffee. Black, Luke said in his low, calm voice. She nodded too quickly, almost spilling the cup as she set it down. Sorry, she whispered, cheeks turning pink. Luke smiled a little, just enough to ease her nerves. No harm done. All evening, Luke watched as she moved from table to table, always apologizing, always blushing. The regulars didn't say much, but a few laughed under their breath when she tripped over a chair leg. Luke didn't join in. He noticed the way her eyes darted to the door every time it opened, like she was afraid of who might walk through it. There was a story behind those eyes, he could tell, something heavy she carried but didn't speak about. When the diner finally closed, the streets outside had gone quiet. Luke stepped out ready to head home when he noticed Emily standing by a small blue car, turning the key again and again. The engine wouldn't start. She leaned her head on the steering wheel, looking close to tears. Luke walked over slowly. Trouble? He asked. She looked up, startled, then nodded. It just died again. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bother anyone. Not a bother, Luke said softly. I can give you a ride. She hesitated, biting her lip. Then, seeing the kindness in his eyes, she nodded. Thank you, I'd really appreciate it. The ride back to her rented cabin on the edge of town was quiet at first. The night sky stretched endless above them, stars scattered like dust over the dark plains. Luke kept his eyes on the road, not wanting to make her uncomfortable. He could feel how tense she was beside him, clutching her small purse like it held her whole life inside. You new around here? He asked finally. She nodded. A few weeks. I needed a change. Her voice cracked a little at the end, but she didn't say more. Luke didn't press. He just nodded. Well, Emporium's a slow town. Takes time to get used to. When they reached her cabin, the wind had grown cold. Emily stepped out, wrapping her coat tight around her. Thank you again, Mr. Carter, he said. Luke Carter. Thank you, Mr. Carter, she said softly. You're the first person here who's been kind to me. She looked down quickly, embarrassed. I mean, I'm not used to people caring much. Luke studied her for a moment, then smiled gently. Then I'll do my best not to give you a reason to regret it. For the first time, she smiled back, small, unsure, but real. Good night, Luke. Good night, Miss Emily, he said, tipping his hat. After that night, their paths crossed often. Luke started stopping by the diner more than usual, always sitting at the same corner booth. Emily would blush every time she poured his coffee, trying to act calm. Sometimes he'd leave her a note under the napkin, simple things like good coffee today or you're getting better at this. She kept every one of those notes in a small tin box under her bed. Soon, Luke began helping her outside work too. He fixed the loose boards on her porch, repaired her fence when the wind blew it down, and taught her how to ride a horse one lazy Sunday. She laughed nervously when she almost fell, grabbing onto his arm for balance. Her cheeks turned red, but Luke only grinned. You're doing fine, he said. Life in Emporium slowed down around them. People noticed the quiet connection between the cowboy and the shy city girl. Some whispered about it, but Luke didn't care. Emily was finally smiling again. She'd started baking biscuits, leaving a small basket at his ranch gate every week. And sometimes late at night, Luke would look out his window toward the dim light glowing from her cabin and think that maybe, just maybe, he'd found something worth holding on to. But peace rarely comes easy. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of red, a black car rolled into town. Emily froze when she saw it outside the diner. The man who stepped out was tall, sharply dressed, and carried a smirk that made her stomach twist. Luke noticed her hands start to shake as she dropped a tray. You okay? Luke asked quietly. She didn't answer. Her face had gone pale. The man's voice carried through the diner, smooth, too familiar. "Emily," he said. "There you are." Luke watched her step back, her breath catching. "I told you not to come," she whispered. The man laughed.
"You don't get to tell me what to do."
"You belong with me, remember?" Luke stood up slowly. The whole room went silent. "She said no," he said, his voice calm but firm. The man turned, sizing Luke up. "And who are you?" "Someone who listens when a lady says she doesn't want trouble." The stranger scoffed and took a step closer, but Luke didn't move. His eyes, usually so gentle, hardened like steel. "You hurt her," Luke said evenly. "She's not going anywhere." For a long moment, no one breathed. The man finally cursed under his breath and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Emily stood frozen, tears gathering in her eyes. Luke stepped closer, his voice soft again. "He won't bother you now." She looked up at him, her voice trembling. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." Luke met her gaze and gave a faint smile. "Don't have to know you to care, Miss Emily." That night, when he walked her home again, neither spoke. The wind rustled the dry grass, and somewhere in the distance a coyote called. When they reached her porch, Emily turned to him. Her voice was quiet but full of emotion. "No one's ever stood up for me before," she said. "Oh, you're the first." Luke looked at her, his hat in his hands. "Then I'll do my best to make sure I'm the last man who ever needs to." She smiled through her tears, her cheeks pink in the dim porch light. "You already have," she whispered. Luke nodded once, gently tipping his hat. Then he turned, walking back toward the fading light of his ranch, unaware that from that moment on, her heart had already chosen him. The next morning, sunlight poured across the empty streets of Emporium. Dust floated in the air like soft smoke, and the town whispered about what had happened the night before. People at the diner couldn't stop talking. They said Luke Carter, the quiet cowboy, had stepped between a frightened girl and a man from her past. Some called it foolish, others called it brave. But Luke didn't care what anyone said. He only cared about the look on Emily's face when she realized she was safe. When Luke saddled his horse that morning, he saw her standing by the fence near her cabin. She looked small against the wide sky, her coat buttoned tight, hair tied up neatly as if she was trying to hold herself together. He rode over slowly, hat tilted low. "You didn't have to do that for me," she said softly when he stopped. Luke looked down at her, his face calm as ever. "Miss Emily, I'd do it again. Every time." She blinked back tears and nodded. She wanted to say more, but words always seemed to slip away when she was near him, so instead she smiled. A small, quiet smile that said more than thanks ever could. In the days that followed, the man never returned. Luke made sure of it. He talked to the sheriff and a few folks he trusted. He didn't threaten anyone or make a scene. He just made sure word spread that Emily Hart was under his watch. The town understood what that meant. Emily's fear began to fade slowly, like the last bit of fog after sunrise. She started humming again while working in the diner. She even laughed when one of the old cowhands teased her about her baking. Each day she felt lighter. But no matter how much she smiled, her eyes always searched the window at sunset, half expecting Luke's horse to pass by. And most days it did. Sometimes he would stop in for coffee and stay longer than needed. They talked about small things, the weather, the ranch, the color of the wildflowers that grew after the rain. Luke was a man of few words, but Emily found peace in his silence. It made her feel safe. One evening, the first snow of winter began to fall. It was rare in Emporium, but it made everything look softer. The ranch was quiet, the fences lined with white dust. Luke was in the barn feeding the horses when he heard a knock. Emily stood at the door, a basket in her hands, her cheeks red from the cold. "I brought something for you," she said shyly. Luke wiped his hands on his coat and smiled. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," she said, stepping inside. "You've done so much for me, Luke." He lifted the cloth on the basket and found biscuits, still warm. "You made these?" She nodded, smiling nervously. "I'm still learning, but I tried." Luke picked one up, took a bite, and nodded slowly. "Tastes like care," he said. And she laughed for the first time that night. A soft, musical laugh that filled the whole barn. They sat together for a while, talking as snow piled outside. Emily told him about the city, about how she once dreamed of being a teacher before life turned hard. Luke listened quietly, eyes thoughtful. He didn't interrupt, didn't pity her. He just listened. When she finally ran out of words, she looked down at her hands and whispered, "I don't know how to start again." Luke leaned forward slightly. "You already did, Emily. The day you stopped running." She looked up, and for the first time she didn't feel small. Winter deepened, but the bond between them grew stronger. Luke began visiting the diner every morning before sunrise, leaving a fresh flower on the counter. Emily always found it before opening time, her heart warming each time. In return, she started leaving him small notes tucked into his coat pocket whenever he visited. Short messages that said things like, "Thank you for being here," or "Don't forget your scarf today." They never said what they truly felt aloud, but the whole town could see it. Even the sheriff joked, "That cowboy's gone and found himself a reason to shave on Sundays." Then one day, Emily came to the ranch early, carrying a small envelope. "It's my new teaching job," she said with shining eyes. "The schoolhouse down the road offered me a position." Luke's heart swelled with pride. "That's good news," he said softly. "You'll be great." She looked at him, her eyes full of emotion. "You believe that?" "I've seen the way you care," Luke said. "That's what makes a teacher worth listening to." She smiled again, a little braver this time. But before she left, she added in a whisper, "You know, you're the first person who's ever believed in me." Luke looked at her for a long moment, his voice quiet but steady. "Then I'll make sure I'm the last one who ever lets you forget it." Days turned into weeks. Emily's students adored her. Luke would sometimes ride by the schoolhouse pretending to check the fence line, though both of them knew he was just making sure she was all right. At night, she'd stop by his ranch, bringing leftover stew or apple pie. They'd sit under the porch light, sharing stories until the stars filled the sky. One evening, as the snow melted and spring crept in, Emily stood by the fence watching the sunset. Luke came up beside her. "You've made this place feel alive again," he said. She turned to him, eyes soft. "No, Luke. You did that for me." They stood quietly for a while, the golden light wrapping around them like warmth itself. Then Emily spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. "When I first came here, I thought I'd never feel safe again, but now, I don't want to leave." Luke smiled faintly, his hat tilted low. "Then don't," she blinked, surprised. "You mean that?" He nodded. "You belong here, Emily, you always have." Her lips trembled, not from fear this time, but from something deeper, hope. "You're my first reason to trust again," she said softly. Luke stepped closer, his voice quiet but certain. "Then I swear I'll be your last reason to ever doubt it." The world seemed to still for a moment. The wind brushed her hair, and the smell of grass and dust filled the air. Emily didn't need fancy promises. The truth was already there between them, steady, simple, real. As weeks passed, their lives blended naturally. Emily spent her mornings at the school and her evenings helping at the ranch. The horses grew used to her laughter. The kitchen always smelled like biscuits and coffee. The silence that once filled Luke's house was gone, replaced by the gentle sound of two hearts finding peace. One night, as stars stretched endless across the Texas sky, Luke found her sitting on the porch steps, wrapped in a blanket. He joined her quietly. "I never thought I'd end up here," she said, smiling at the horizon. "But maybe this is where I was supposed to be all along." Luke nodded, looking out at the open land. "Home isn't always a place, Emily. Sometimes it's a person." She looked at him then, and he didn't have to say more. The look in his eyes told her everything. No rush, no doubt, just a promise that would last. And when morning came, sunlight spilling across the fields, Luke saddled two horses and turned to her with a small grin. "Come on," he said. "Let's start your first real ride." Emily blushed, her heart racing, but she nodded and climbed onto the saddle beside him. They rode across the open land, laughter echoing through the cool air. For the first time in years, she wasn't running from something. She was riding toward something real, and the cowboy beside her, steady, kind, and true, kept his silent promise in every look, every word, and every gentle smile. He had sworn she'd be his last. And in that wide Texas sky where love spoke softly and forever, she believed him.